Tyrone Seale. Tyrone, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. The President Cyril Ramaphosa had the report since July. Why did he sit on it for this long?
Well, I think the first thing is to say that the President gave the commitment right at the start of this process that we would publish the report so that we would promote transparency and so that South Africans could all get to interact with the report. We've made good on that commitment after a process in which we consulted with dozens of persons who had been named in the report to check with them if they'd be happy for us to publish the parts of the report that referred to them. We also did this because there were a number of applications under the Promotion of Access to Information Act from parties and persons who wish to have a sight of that report. That process was concluded very recently, and we are now in the position where we were able to publish the report this morning.
And we know that all heads would roll, and some of the senior Department of Health officials have been implicated adversely on this particular report, including the Acting Director General, Dr. Anbe Pillay. And we know that he sought permission to deviate from the procurement processes. So that on its own is a gross irregularity. So what kind of action will be taken on Dr. Anbe Pillay?
Well, I think that one has to acknowledge that the report, after the findings, it makes a number of referrals and recommendations in respect of individuals and parties against whom evidence has been gathered. And so the process ahead now is that departments and entities have received these referrals and recommendations from the SIU, and it is up to those institutions now to institute and to take the action recommended by the SIU, obviously with due process being respected. So because the principle of innocent or guilty stands even under these conditions, and so investigations need to continue. And there are any number of actions that could result, or processes that could result. It could be disciplinary action, it could be civil action, it could be criminal action. But I think it is the expectation now that departments will treat the evidence that has been gathered as serious, and that they will act on this with the necessary speed.
So in the interim, will they be placed on suspension? I mean, the affected parties, will they be suspended pending the finalization of the dispensation of the report into the necessary or the relevant departments?
It is very likely. And what it means is that all the departments or entities concerned will have to take this evidence and see how they can process this in the context of the laws that apply in the country, and in the case of the public service, the regulations that apply to disciplinary processes. And I'm confident that those processes will be straightforward enough for departments and for entities to act on these referrals and recommendations.
All right, Tyrone, thank you so much for your update. We appreciate your time. That is the acting presidential spokesperson, Tyrone Seale, joining us via Zoom. And to talk to us about the implications of this report is political analyst Sanusha Naidu. Sanusha, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's not even 10 a.m. yet, and you have to grapple with a damning 100-page report. What's your reaction to this?
Good morning, Sanusha. Yes, indeed. Everybody's up and about, because I think this was one of these reports that was eagerly awaited and looking to see what the president would be saying in this context. I mean, it basically talks to a seriously lack of oversight, complete override of the regulations of the procurement process in the country, a deviation from that normal procurement process, and of course implicates the acting DDG, or the suspended acting DDG, which was Dr. Anbe Pillay, other members in the former minister's executive office, including now the suspended DG. So it's quite a damning report, in a sense that it comes at a time when we know that under COVID-19 there were questions around how procurement processes were undertaken. We see now in this report that there was this fraudulent behavior or a deliberate attempt to mislead National Treasury around the procurement of these contracts. And again, I think it's very important to put into context that we're going into an election. This is another issue that has come in this week in terms of the fact that we had the whole question about the Arts Council and what happened in terms of how money was abused and misused in the Arts Council, where the minister had referred to that report. And then again, we got the whole Zondo Commission and what has unfolded there. So I think at the end of the day, it seems that wherever we turn, we just kind of cannot ignore or cannot basically hide from the way in which state capture, corruption, misappropriation of funds has taken place. And I think it's quite sad and it's almost very, very disturbing to see the way in which senior members, having said that they commit to this public office to serve in the interests of the people, have decided that it's okay for me to basically deviate from those norms and values and those principles and rules in terms of what's contained in the Constitution, because I don't have to be accountable. So I think what I'm really interested in listening to the acting spokesperson in the presidency and listening to what the president has released as the report, and now for people to take third parties to take, all government institutions to take action. I think it's very important, I think it's very important now to see what action will be taken, not only against the suspended DDG, Dr. Pillay, but also those that have also been recommended for some kind of investigation and action in the report, but also in terms of what does this mean for the suspended minister.
Sanusha, it boggles the mind, the fact that why are these executives made the sacrificial lambs when there's so many people involved, there's so many hidden hands and hidden faces in this particular debacle, and it boggles the mind who had authorized the deviation from Dr. Anban Pillay to deviate from the acceptable procurement processes, and those people who authorized the deviation should also be held liable. And don't you think it should be time, it's time now that there should be oversight on political principles and senior government executives so that they don't influence procurement processes?
Sampiwe, that's such an important question, but it's a question we keep coming back to. How deep does this go? Who was the actual individual or individuals that said, there's the green light, now you go to National Treasury and you misrepresent why we need to have a deviation from the normal procurement process? I think when you look at the report, and I couldn't get through, from this morning till now, I couldn't get through the 100 pages, but from what I could glean from the pages that I had read, is that there was a WhatsApp group message. How do you do business? How do you actually instruct people on WhatsApp? Where's the official line? Where's the way in which you go through the ministry process in terms of official line communication, and then go to your different managers in your ministry? And I think, again, there's so much that's left in terms of the periphery here, that trying to get to the minister or trying to get to that person who gave the final instruction to say, we want you to do this for us, I think is going to be very important, because this again tells you what we have seen in the context of the Zuma era as well. Mr. Zuma has not had anything that's been attached to him in terms of the fact to say that he gave the final say. It was all done in a kind of spokesman. It was all done in the kind of blurred way. And I think we're seeing this continuously as a characteristic. The oversight role that you mentioned, the oversight role is the fact that when you take the decision to become a minister or public official, you implicitly sign that professional service, that kind of oath of office. And if that is not what's going to guide your conscience, I don't know what else oversight you need, because at the end of the day, you can have oversight, but if people are not going to implement it, then what's the use?
And how would you diagnose the problem? Is it South Africa's flawed tender system, or is it simply the involvement of politicians and political principles?
I think our tender system and the checks and balances and the institutional processes that we have to carry out a simple procurement. For example, if you want to procure something, you've got this process. That's not the problem. All of those institutional architecture is there. It's all there for you to follow. I think it's when people become devious in that process, when they say, well, where do we need to implement these oversight mechanisms, and where we can get away with it? This in itself, what really I find intriguing about this is that people feeling that they can get away with it because I'm the minister, I have this position of power, and I'm actually untouchable. What really is baffling and bemusing about the situation is, in a country where our media is so good when it comes to picking out where these inaccuracies, where the business has not been up to the standard and the procurement process and has basically violated these instruments, how do you think you're going to get away with it and then still say, I didn't do anything wrong? So I think at the end of the day, to think that you are basically above these institutions and these oversight mechanisms makes one wonder whether or not you are a clever deviant.
Why that the president took so long to release the report? I just spoke to the acting presidency spokesperson who said that he had informed, he had issued out third-party notices to sort of, get the input from the affected parties. Doesn't this sound like he got permission from the affected parties to publish this report?
Well, it does come across like that, Simpiwe. I think very often you get the impression that, I mean, let's be honest, the president is very consultative. He wants to make sure everything is in place, in process. He doesn't want to leave anything that may come back and say, oh, Mr. President, you didn't do follow the necessary procedures and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, what this meant was that it creates an impression that the president, in being too careful and too cautious, also then can be criticized for being vulnerable in that space. And I think by being vulnerable in that space, he ends up then opening up these ideas that he's trying to get more and more of the buy-in from those that are implicated in the report. And I suspect that was also the reason why he took so long to deal with the former minister on that space, because it was very much about how the former minister was going to deal with the situation. And of course, the president was hoping that would come to some kind of amicable engagement around it. So I think, yeah, you're right. He opens himself up for criticism, but on the other hand, he wants to make sure that everything is done according to what applies it according to his mind and how he sees things in terms of that process.
All right, Sanusha, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, always.
Political analyst there, Sanusha Naidu, just reacting to the release of the SIU report into the Digital Vibes contract.